Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. This is the Legacy Room. It was a donation to the community, which is really nice. It falls right in line with having a caring community. And we thank Tracy Rivera, she's the local State Farm agent here in Imperial Beach, for allowing the community to use this room for events such as this, or I understand Girl Scouts and other folks use the room too, and other groups are welcome to contact her to use this room, which is really great. I'd also like to thank all of you for coming. We have been on this journey for almost 4 years since the city of Imperial Beach was asked to allow sick and dying patients safe access to medical cannabis. It's a very important topic, and it's one that the community is not only divided about, but very interested about. And it's funny how easy it is to persuade somebody that science should indeed dictate policy. And that's kind of why we're here today. Policy has, in Imperial Beach, been, I would call it hijacked, I think, by politics, rather than sensible, even-keeled thought. And so what we've done is we've constructed a ballot initiative that was sensible. It took into consideration the public's concern for safety, but most importantly, patients' safety on obtaining something that has been that's been prescribed to them or recommended to them by their physician. And so today I'm happy to announce that we have a local candidate that is running for city council that supports Prop S, supports patients' access to safe, reliable medicine, and that is Erica Lowry. And I urge anybody that's going to vote yes on Prop S to strongly consider putting Erica Lowry in office so that we would have a champion on our side. But most important today is we have the Libertarian vice presidential candidate, the party that really I think should have been, if no other, included in yesterday's debate. The debate was extremely important. It lacked substance on a couple of levels that I believe the Libertarian Party may have brought to that table. So diversity is wonderful, and common sense and bringing in a logical dialogue to this debate is really needed. Our local politicians seem to be counting on fear-mongering or cynical debate. So today we have actually a judge from Orange County who is the, again, vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, to speak sensibly about regulations, about the need for safe access to medical cannabis, not only in Imperial Beach, but throughout at least San Diego County and anywhere else that patients may suffer. There are 4 propositions. Proposition S here in Imperial Beach, which we're very much looking forward to passing, as well as several propositions in North San Diego County, Lemon Grove, Lemon Grove, Del Mar, and Solana Beach. And we are very hopeful that patients in those areas will receive a yes on their votes to receive safe access local to them as well. So I babbled on enough. I don't even know that I said anything correctly, but again, I'm glad you're very much glad you're here, and thank you for listening. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Judge Jim Gray, Vice Presidential Candidate for the Libertarian Party. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it's nice to be with good people. I have a theory, basically, maybe of my professional life, and that is make the system work. Sitting back and saying, oh, ain't it awful, oh, I wish somebody would, that sort of thing, simply does not work. And I applaud you folks for being here, applaud your views. I happen to agree with you. You agree with us. Tracy, I really directly thank you. You're opening your doors I doubt it, any commercial risk, but even if it is, yours taking a stand. And these are things that we as people need to do. Because it's our government, folks. It's our government, and if it's not working, whose fault is it? It's our fault. It's our obligation to make our government work. Go back to Thomas Jefferson, a longtime hero of mine, of course. Maybe you've even heard of the fellow. And he would make the comment that, look, in a society, if you have the people afraid of the government, that's tyranny. But if you have the government afraid of the people, that's democracy. Where are we today? And I venture to say that we're certainly farther in the first than the second. That our government today, it's programmed. They're trying to have us live in fear. They're taking away our civil liberties and our freedoms. The soul of the United States of America is our civil liberties and our freedoms, and our soul today is under attack by our very own government. Not with regard only to the war on drugs. In fact, I have called drug prohibition the biggest failed policy in the history of the United States of America, second only to slavery. That's a pretty strong statement, and I'll back it up. In fact, I was being interviewed earlier by the Tribune here, and I made that comment to her and said, you name any area that you want of our world today, and I will show you how our policy of drug prohibition is making it worse. And she tried a few, and then she finally gave up. She said, oh, those are easy, try a harder one sort of thing. It's true, it's all pervasive. The United States of America leads the world in the incarceration of our people, both by sheer numbers as well as per capita. And here, I assure you, we're number one does not make me proud, and it shouldn't make you proud either. A senator by the name of Jim Webb from Virginia, United States Senator, saw those statistics and made the comment, which is certainly accurate, either we're the most evil people in the world or we're doing something wrong. Which do you think it is? So these are things that we need to get to. Give you a little bit of background. I am a former drug warrior. Actually, I was a Navy JAG attorney, actually wrote the charge sheets for my shipmates in the island of Guam at the Naval Air Station. Certainly including drug cases. I was a criminal defense attorney in the Navy as well and saw this firsthand. Then I was a federal prosecutor. I actually held the record for the largest drug prosecution in the Central District of California. 75 kilos of heroin, 165 pounds. Back in 1978 was and is a whole bunch of heroin. Does anyone here have a concept of what the record prosecution is today in the Central District of California? 18 tons of cocaine in one place. Just imagine that sort of thing. But didn't really give it much thought. Like most people, I was raised to kind of, without thinking about it, equate heroin with bad, with evil, with prison. And that's just kind of what we accepted. But then I was appointed to become a judge back in 1983, a long time ago now, in Orange County. And it was becoming increasingly apparent to me that we're just churning low-level drug offenders through the system for no good purpose whatsoever. That we are ruining people's lives, rendering them unemployable, filling our prisons with low-level drug offenders. It just goes on and on. And then you see it from the other end. We're arresting even big-time drug dealers, say from the city of Santa Ana or Costa Mesa or Newport Beach. Does that mean now that cocaine is no longer available in those cities? No. It just means it's an employment opportunity for someone else. Within about an hour and a half, that person is being replaced. Then you start looking even more closely, and you see the absolute truth in the criminal justice system. Because the tougher you get with regard to nonviolent drug offenses, literally the softer you get with regard to the prosecution of robbery, rape, and murder. And that's what eventually pushed me over the side. That I had in my own courtroom, I was in a municipal court enforcing a superior court judge's sentence. And there was a really bad guy, fairly young man, who would basically go with prostitutes, who would beat them up, steal their money, and rape them. And by the time all of this sentence was over, he was going to serve about another 2 weeks, and then he'd be released with credit for time served. And so I gave him his rights, and we talked about all this, and he gave me the factual basis. And then when it was over, and he's very respectful, of course, people always are at time of sentencing, but when he was led back into lockup, he gave a war whoop as if he'd won. And I still remember thinking at the time, he's giving out that war whoop because he has won. We're so busy using our criminal justice resources to prosecute nonviolent drug offenders, we're not using them for bad guys like this. When I wrote my book called Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed and What We Can Do About It, and actually in my chapter on criminal violence, showed, using the federal government's own statistics, that we're only half as successful prosecuting homicides in 1990 as we had been in 1980. Why? Because the Reagan administration, once again, ratcheted up the war on drugs, using all these resources, and we didn't have the resources for prosecuting people for homicides. So I've been speaking publicly about this ever since, and we're We're making progress, although I came out and did something very unusual for a sitting trial court judge. Back in 1992, held a press conference and said what we're doing with regard to drug policy is not working, we've got to change it, and I've been talking about it ever since. The reason I go through a lot of this is that, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know who Governor Gary Johnson was at all, until I opened up my newspaper one day in 1999 and found out that he had conducted his own press conference, that he, as the sitting judge of New Mexico, said he had conducted what he called his own audit and determined that the war on drugs is not working and started implementing changes in New Mexico. Yes, more needle exchange programs because they are neutral with regard to the using of drugs, but they reduce incidence of bloodborne diseases like AIDS and hepatitis, etc. by 50%. I mean, it's a crime against our own people not to have needle exchange programs where they're necessary. Reduce the necessity of arresting and charging numbers of people unless they're causing harm to others. So soon they had a drug policy forum in Albuquerque. I was invited to speak, got to meet Governor Gary Johnson, and I've known of him ever since. In fact, he was one of those that endorsed my book, which made me pleased. I started calling him when he started running for president, the most qualified person to be president of the United States that I know of. And it's true. He has, we speak, more administrative experience than both President Obama and Governor Romney combined. He actually took his own, after he graduated from college, his own handyman company, and he was the handyman. And then he worked that into the largest construction company in the state of New Mexico. He had 1,000 employees, made payroll, gave value, never laid off anyone when times got tough. He's done it. He knows how to do it. And then while he was the governor of New Mexico, actually left the state with $1 billion surplus, stood up for liberties and everything, got very high rankings with regard to that, and actually got the state government out of the way with a lot of the needless regulations, streamlined them. Of course we need regulations still, but streamlined them, made them more understandable, more workable, and that resulted in the creation per capita of more private sector jobs than any other state in the country. So he is, I called him the most qualified person to be president that I know of. Maybe I said it a few too many times because then he asked me if he is running mate. So now what am I supposed to say? Okay? So I am his running mate, and I am truly proud. This is the most qualified person to be president, and honestly, I am the most qualified person to be vice president. That even includes Joe Biden, who's been vice president for 3 and something years. You know, I was in the Peace Corps. I'll be the first Peace Corps volunteer to be elected to national office, and I'm proud of that. Puedo hablar español como la gente, también, y todavía, para estudiar. So, you know, I can speak Spanish. I love people from Hispanic, Latin America, etc. We can talk about immigration and stuff if you want to, too, which is a travesty, just a travesty, inflicted upon us by Republicans and Democrats. They could change it if they want. If they wanted to change this, they could have changed it decades ago. They don't want to. A lot of very powerful Republicans love the idea of cheap labor. They don't want to change it. A lot of very powerful Democrats love the idea of all these people coming into the country and eventually voting for Democrats. They don't want to change it. In the meantime, millions of people are being harmed. Talk about the San Diego area, my goodness sakes. You know, it's out of control. We can talk about more about that if you want to. We have the ways. We have the ways to bring in jobs. We have the ways to address our economy. And we are the people that actually stand up for equal marriage, that sort of marriage equality. You heard the Obama administration standing up and saying, well, maybe so, maybe not, I'm kind of reconsidering, but it's a state issue. Translation, they don't have to do anything. We say it's a federal issue, it's an equal protection issue, it's a constitutional issue, which means that it's the next step after racial equality and gender equality, and now it's marriage equality. And we stand for it. You can agree with this or not agree with this, but you know, we'll tell you where we stand. And I have a real defect in today's world being a politician or being running for political office. I'll tell you the truth. I'm just too old to change. I've been a judge for 25 years. You ask me a question and I'll answer it. That's the way Governor Johnson is too. Now let's talk about these issues. You know, Proposition STWH, that sort of thing, all of these 4. Let's get on with this. Let's pass these initiatives. You can abolish all medical marijuana dispensaries in the state, which is exactly what Romney and Obama will do. You give us 1 or 2 more years under Romney or under Obama, we're so much the same in so many ways. The medical marijuana dispensaries will be gone. The only hope for survival is Governor Gary Johnson. So they are on one side, we are on the other. And you can abolish all of these dispensaries if you want to. It will not, mark my words, will not decrease the amount of marijuana used in this town at all. It'll just push it underground. There won't be any quality control. There won't be any age restrictions addressed. There won't be any taxation. All of these sorts of things will be left to the bad guys. Come on, folks. Who is winning today with regard to this whole war on marijuana? The prison industrial complex. You know, the prison guards union's thriving, thank you very much. The people that build prisons. Today there is an arrest in the United States of America every 43 seconds for a marijuana violation. Every 43 seconds, an arrest for marijuana violations, 85% of those are for nothing more than possession. Using our resources for that, you can overcome an addiction, and the question about how much people get addicted to marijuana, I happen to think that some do. Nevertheless, you can overcome an addiction. What you cannot overcome is a conviction. That stays with you the rest of your life. You have ability to get loans for school. No, you can't do that. You'll lose your driver's license. All this sort of stuff, you cannot overcome those convictions. So again, what are we doing? And you folks can stand up and be proud to support something like Proposition X. I asked the question, because you can imagine, in fact, I'll be on a late night flight tonight to New York, and I'm on the red eye and stuff. I'm traveling around the country. I'll be gone. I have 16 states in the next 12 days that I'll be at and talk about. I ask this question a lot. I'll ask you, how many of you people here feel the federal government has all the answers? Okay, no question, no hands are being raised, and that's the same with everybody. Well then, wait a minute. Why do we have the federal government dictating what we're going to do in California with regard, for example, to marijuana at all? You know, there are initiatives on the ballot in Colorado, state of Washington, state of Oregon, to treat marijuana like alcohol. If anyone here knows anyone that can vote in those three states, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, contact them and strongly suggest that they support those initiatives to treat marijuana like alcohol. Let's take away a whole lot of money, lots and lots of money from juvenile street gangs. Maybe it's the major source of funding from juvenile street gangs today. Let's cripple them and take away a lot of this money. Let's take away a whole bunch of money from Mexican drug cartels. Let's take a whole lot of money away from a lot of other thugs. And let's spend that money to pay our teachers, pay our firefighters, fix our highways. It's going to be sold anyway. Any of you know what the largest cash crop is today in the state of California? It is marijuana. Number 2 is grapes, by the way. You can go up to Sonoma County, you can drive along Highway 5, miles and miles and miles of vineyards. Marijuana is a larger cash crop. Today, ask, don't trust me necessarily, ask the next 10 teenagers you find. Next 10. What is easier for you to get if you want to? Marijuana or alcohol? No, I'll tell you, if they want to, marijuana is easier. Why? Because the alcohol is regulated and controlled by the government, and the illegal drugs are controlled by illegal drug dealers, and they don't ask for ID. What are we doing here? Stand up. Take control of your own lives. How many people here feel that we as adults in the state of California are perfectly competent to address this issue of how marijuana should be addressed? Of course. How about the hemp industry, for heaven's sake? My goodness sakes, what are we doing here? We are importing about $1 billion a year of hemp from that radical country to our north called Canada. We're punishing our own manufacturers, punishing our own agricultural interests. We could revitalize the Northwest. Oregon, Washington, which they will do when they pass this, you can get 4 times the amount of paper pulp from an acre of hemp as you can an acre of trees. It takes 20 years to grow the trees in one season. It's like 9 or 10 months to grow the hemp. What are we doing? Let's treat hemp, legalize hemp actually. Just treat it like cotton. Why not? I mean, you can jerry-rig the stuff. It doesn't have any THC in it. You can get as much of that as you can by smoking my tires. I mean, it's not there. So these are things that we as adults need to stand up and take the government back from the federal government that literally has usurped our power. Literally. They are keeping us in fear. By the way, they are putting this wasn't discussed last night with Biden and Paul Ryan. They're putting our troops in military conflicts in harm's way all around the world. Romney, I call them. Romney and Obama are so much the same, you might as well call them like I do, the Romney. They will continue to keep our troops in harm's way. Governor Gary Johnson says no. We will not attack anybody unless they attack us or our allies. Otherwise, we're going to declare peace. We cannot be the world's policeman. It doesn't work. We can't afford it. It's time to bring these troops home. We stand for that. Romney stands for the other. It just goes on and on. Jobs, immigration, you name the question. But instead of my rattling on, I want to answer your questions, whatever you want. But I applaud you for your Proposition S, Proposition T, Proposition W, and Proposition H. These are really strong statements, just like Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. They're strong statements to the government to say, let's go back to what made us great. Let's go back to what our founding fathers instituted as the basis for our government, which is the concept of federalism. That means that the most local government possible that can get the job done should be the government that does it. And unless these powers are in the Constitution for the federal government, they're actually reserved for the states, reserved for the people. The 9th and 10th Amendments to the Bill of Rights still lives. Unlike a lot of my brethren on the various courts, I don't think they've read the 9th and 10th Amendments, but we can stand up and say, let's get the government out of our lives. At least on this issue, we're fully competent to do it. One more thought, and then I'd like to take some questions. It makes as much sense to me. Put this gifted actor, Robert Downey Jr., in jail for his heroin problem, and he had one. He is addicted to heroin. He's doing real well now, but he'll always have that craving. He's going to have to continue to be careful. It makes as much sense to me to put Robert Downey Jr. in jail for his heroin problem as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem. You all remember, of course, Betty Ford was the wife of President Gerald Ford, and she's an alcoholic, self-admittedly. It's a medical issue, isn't it? Let's treat it by medical professionals that can help them instead of labeling them criminals and pushing them farther away. Because we don't really have a war on drugs in our country. We don't. We have a war on selective drugs. My drug of choice, alcohol, is far worse than marijuana will ever be. You do the same thing as I do. You go out and talk to the first couple of patrol officers, police officers that you can find, and ask them a question like I do. Done it as a judge, I do it as a citizen, whatever. Hey, have you ever been to a domestic violence disturbance that's based upon marijuana? They laugh at it and say, no, it never happens. It's always alcohol, sometimes methamphetamines or cocaine. So, come on. If we really are concerned about drugs that are hurting people, we should re-prohibit alcohol. How many people feel that's a good idea? I got one hand, okay. You just want to bring Al Capone and the Mexican drug cartels now into alcohol distribution again. Oh, let's talk about a drug that really, really kills people, kills the user. By far the most dangerous of the mind-altering, sometimes addicting drugs, which is tobacco, for heaven's sake. Kills 400,000 people a year. How many people feel that we should make tobacco illegal? No hands there. Well, okay, I understand, but I was on the bench. Now I'm telling you something I wasn't going to. I was on the bench for a number of years, like I said, and there are at least 4 occasions that I can remember in which I sentenced, they were always young men, for being under the influence of methamphetamines. And here, still in California, mandatory minimum sentence of 90 days, couldn't give them any less, won't give them any more than that, so they knew what the sentence was going to be. It's Section 11550 of the Health and Safety Code, still required today. At time of sentencing, they're entitled to make a statement if they want to. So I gave them that opportunity, of course, and each one in their own words said, Your Honor, my drug of choice is marijuana. And I would buy my marijuana from the same person for years. One day, unbeknownst to me, that supplier sold me some marijuana laced with methamphetamines. I smoked it and got myself hooked. And I keep thinking to myself, wait a minute, that's an issue that we can address. That's something that should not happen. We all know smoking cigarettes is dangerous, but at least if you go to your local mini mart and you buy a pack of Marlboros, you're going to know it's not laced with methamphetamines. Those are things that we can and must take care of. When we finally came to our senses and repealed alcohol prohibition, all this bathtub gin problem that we used to have, the impurities in the alcohol that killed people, that attacked their nervous system, put them in a coma, all those were gone immediately. So all of these things are issues. 90% of the drug problems we have in our country today are drug prohibition problems, are drug money problems, leaving about 10% that's actually the drugs themselves. I'm not minimizing it, but it's only about 10%. Ask Mexico, your neighbors to the south. 60,000 people have died a violent death because of President Calderon's war on drugs in the last 5 years, having nothing to do with drugs whatsoever, nothing. It's all to do with drug money. And by the way, it's our drug money that's done, and we should be ashamed of ourselves. We must change that system. You're making a stand here in Imperial Beach and elsewhere. We're making a stand in Colorado. It's for liberty, it's for responsibility, it's for sanity, for heaven's sakes. And if we're gonna spend this money, let's at least have it spent to assist in paying our government officials and fixing our roads, etc. So that's where Governor Gary Johnson and I stand. I can go and talk to you about a whole lot of other issues. We're the most qualified people to be president, we're the most experienced, and we have ideas. And how many of you have seen any of the ads, hundreds of millions of dollars from the ads from Romney or Obama, that actually talk about their record? Anybody? They can't, because they don't have a record to run on. They don't. How many have seen any ads, hundreds of millions of dollars on our television, where they talk about ideas? They don't have any. We do. What they spend their hundreds of millions of dollars on is what? Saying how inept the other one is. And we agree with both of them. They're right. We do have ideas. We are qualified. A vote for Governor Gary Johnson is a vote for progress, for really helping people, for prosperity, for equal opportunity and freedom. And I'm proud to be his running mate, and that's the most exciting thing that's happened to me since the birth of my children. And we're spreading the word. We need you to help us. So thank you for the opportunity of speaking with you. Really appreciate it. Congratulations to you, and thank you, and I look forward to some questions. So thank you.
Imperial Beach voters are going to be deciding, I guess, what's best in voting yes or no on Prop S, and the opponents of Prop S have criticized, I guess, the yes on campaign for a large amount of influence from outside in this campaign. Why should people listen to what you have to say about this?
Fair question. I do not live in Imperial Beach. I don't know what other people are saying. I can see what works and what doesn't. I believe, the courage and the integrity to tell the truth as I see it. I want everybody to make up their own mind. But today, we're moralizing about these issues, and what we should be doing is managing. Because we can wish these drugs away, we can wish marijuana away, and by the way, it does clearly have viable medical issues. There's no question about it. And in fact, you want to see some hypocrisy? Every drug czar in the United States of America that I know of, maybe except Kurlikowski, has pontificated. Oh, there's no study in our country that shows that marijuana has any viable medical usages. And you know something? They're right. The problem is the federal government will not allow those studies to take place. And you have reputable organizations, the University of California at Berkeley, the Centers for Disease Control, Princeton, others that are knocking on the door of the federal government saying, let us study it, and the government won't let them do it. So let's just make up your own mind. And as I say when I sign my books, it's okay to talk about drug policy. Just because we discuss this does not mean we condone people going out and using any of these drugs, just like we don't condone smoking cigarettes, even though they're not illegal. So let's regulate and control these issues and manage them instead of moralizing about them. So I'm just asking the people here in Imperial Beach or these other places to give it serious consideration. It's all they have to do, because if they do that with any form of integrity or open-mindedness at all, it'll pass by 87%.
Is there anything about Prop S that you don't agree with, or?
You know, I believe that the people of this city should be able to have medical marijuana dispensaries for the reasons that I stated. It's going to be here anyway. There are a lot of folks that how many, I don't know, but numbers of folks that live in an apartment. Well, they can't grow their own apartment. You can only have up to 3 people in a particular location, and how much they can grow and the rest of this stuff. There are problems, but you know something directly. Yes, there are people in our world, maybe here too, that are going to take advantage of the system. They've certainly found that in Los Angeles, and there are some real fly-by-night organizations out there. That's a regulation problem. And the answer is, if they're breaking the state law, for heaven's sake, prosecute them. End of discussion. If they're not paying their taxes, give them an audit. But let's do it by the state and not by the federal government. And that's the problem we're having. Let's enforce these laws. I'm a judge. I was required by my oath of office to enforce the laws, and I did so. I even enforce these drug laws. Like I said, I don't have to do it quietly, and I don't do that either. Let's have the state do it. We're perfectly adult enough to be able to do it. And as far as those that are within the laws, leave them alone. In fact, say thank you. It's the right way to go. There must be more questions than this.
Is there anything else what do you think you would have added if you were on the stage last night with Vice President Biden and Representative Biden?
I would have responded that these two parties are so much the same. You know, they're showing how macho they can be by how quickly we'll bomb Iran. And the answer is no. Actually, Joe Biden made one good comment last night saying, you know, this is a really responsible thing and we shouldn't attack anybody unless our national security interests are at stake. Boy, I agree with that. I wish he would employ that. I said at the time, it was 2004, when we were seriously talking about putting troops in Iraq, I said at the time publicly, because I was actually running as a Libertarian for the U.S. Senate, said publicly, if we put troops on the ground in Iraq, it'll be the biggest mistake of my lifetime. Nothing has happened since to change my mind. With regard to bombing Iran, going to war with Iran, that will be a cataclysmic mistake. We're unable to do it, we can't afford it, it's inappropriate. What are we going to do after we occupy them? You know, people in our government, I'll bet you Mr. Biden and Mr. Ryan don't even know the difference between a Sunni and Shia or a Kurd. They're different. And furthermore, this whole idea, people are talking about, oh, maybe Obama's a Muslim. I don't know, honestly, I don't care. So what if he is? There are a lot of it. Just because you're Muslim does not mean you're a terrorist. Just because, you know, all of these stereotypes, people of the world's religions all usually have the same values. Let's hold people accountable for their actions and not whatever religion they might be. You know, we're making a mistake. The federal government, under the Republicans and the Democrats, is making a living keeping us living in fear. They thrive on it. This war on terror, for heaven's sake. What would have happened in 1941 if we went to war against Nazism? And Nazism, not a good thing. We'd still be at war with Nazis. How do you know who it is, where it is, what it is, when it'll be over, what our objectives are? Our country, government is having us live in fear. These are things that were not discussed. The war on drugs was not discussed yesterday. Tragedy. Tragedy. I was on Huffington Post this morning in a debate with the Justice Party and the Constitution Party. And we talked about the war on drugs. I brought it up because it's so important. It wouldn't be brought up otherwise. Jobs, tell you quickly. Repeal the income tax. What's the connection between that and jobs? It's huge. First of all, just quickly, the General Accountability Office estimates that we as taxpayers, we as companies spend somewhere between $260 and $600 billion every year simply keeping tax records and preparing our income taxes. All that money would be saved. Yes, that'll stimulate the economy, do away with a whole bunch of bureaucracy, administration, and fraud, but that's not the reason. What is the reason? Our goods, our products, agricultural, manufacturing, whatever, today have an artificial disadvantage when we export them to another country. Why? Because they pay taxes on them before they leave our shores, thereby increasing their cost. Because the companies have paid taxes on them, they've paid payroll taxes, they're higher, competing with other goods around the world that have not. Same thing in reverse. You have other goods from other countries that have not paid taxes on them, I don't care, from Singapore, Japan, Brazil, wherever, coming into our country as imports, have an artificial competitive advantage against our goods because they have paid taxes and everybody pays the same sales taxes. If you go to a retail consumption tax, that will level the playing field. Then all of the goods will pay the same taxes. I was on an airplane. I can't remember where I was going. I'm flying a lot now. Sitting next to a man, an executive from Nike, you know, the shoe manufacturer, discussing this. Literally, his eyes got big. He looked at me and said, Judge Gray, this is sensational. If we were to repeal the income tax, most companies would bring their manufacturing back to the United States of America. Translation, millions and millions of jobs. It's a reverse outsourcing. Governor Gary Johnson and I will do this. Republicans and Democrats, number one, won't, and number two, don't want to. Why? Because the members of Congress get huge amounts of political power by voting for tax breaks to their wealthy constituents, and they don't want to give it up. When we're elected, we'll have such a mandate, we'll be able to go over the heads of these members of Congress, telling you, you know, if you have a member of Congress that's not voting for this initiative, he or she is putting their interests ahead of yours. Go talk to them. And besides, we will have a coalition government where we will, yes, have libertarians, yes, have independents that are highly placed in our administration, but also Republicans and Democrats. And then when we have this political bipolar conduct, this senseless politician stuff, will have some of their members, their own colleagues from our administration. As long as they agree with our approach of being financially responsible and socially tolerant, we'll have them go out and talk to their colleagues and say, come on, get on board, this is a good idea. We'll give credit to anybody that has a good idea. I don't care what party they're in. Anybody that embraces a good idea, we'll give them credit. We will actually have Congress working for us instead of for them. It's exciting. This is big time stuff. Finally, I understand. We're not in the debates. We're filing a lawsuit either today or Monday in Washington to try to get the governor in the next debate, this next Tuesday. If we're not in the debates, we're not going to be viable, seen as viable, we're not going to win the election. But if we just get 5%, I'll be horrified, I'll be morose if we don't get it a lot more than 5%. If we just get 5%, it will be the beginning of the end of the two-party system. We will then be entitled in 2016 to get federal matching funds. We'll be on the ballot in every state where we get 5% or more without having to jump through all these hoops of ballot access, where, by the way, the Republicans are going around the nation challenging our ballot access. They've brought about 12 to 15 lawsuits in various states. We've been able to defend all of them except Michigan, where we might be in some trouble. But we'll be on the ballots without having to go through all of this, and then we'll be a third-party voice. We are in the mainstream of American political thought. No, we're both financially responsible and socially tolerant. No one will accuse Romney of being socially tolerant. No one will accuse Obama of being financially responsible. We are in the mainstream, and that will require the radical elements of both parties to come more toward the middle. That will be historic. Get us at least that 5%. Send our email, our website link to all of your email friends, all of your Facebook, etc. This is hugely important. It's historic. Final comment, then I promise. Thomas Jefferson, again, still lives with me, wrote a letter back from France after we ratified the U.S. Constitution. And he said, congratulations, this is great, but you have a democracy, you have a new republic, it's fragile. You're going to have a revolution every generation. Why? To keep those private interests from invigorating their way into power, sap our vitality and sap our strength. And I'm here to tell you, how many generations has it been since Thomas Jefferson made that comment? Many. I cannot tell you how proud I am, how stimulated I am, how excited I am to say this revolution is finally here, and it takes the form of Governor Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Ray. We'll be responsive for you. We will bring back that prosperity, equal opportunity, and freedom that literally is slipping through our fingers with our great country today. It's really challenging. It's the most exciting thing that's happened to me since the birth of my children. So thank you for what you're doing. Take part. The system isn't working, it's our fault. Make the system work. However you mean, however you feel it should be, that's the way it should be. But I am asking your support. I promise you, everybody that supports Governor Gary Johnson in this election, within a year or two will be deeply proud that he or she have done that. And literally 60% of the people that don't will avidly wish that they had. It's that start. Giving this to you. You have that third voice. We are viable. We are experiencing it. We're going to work for you. Thank you. Good luck to us all. Now, for heaven's sake, get to work.